Captain Jace Malric drifted alone in the wreck of his ship, the Spearhead, surrounded by silence and floating wreckage from a lost battle. His crew was gone, killed, or captured, and only the dead lights of a shattered moon watched him. The ship had no power left except for the emergency systems, and his oxygen was almost gone. His body ached from burns and bruises, and his spirit felt even heavier. In that moment of loneliness, anger, and pain, Jace did something strange. He laughed. A dry, tired laugh, and shouted a joke into the comms. "Is there anyone out there who wants to marry a broken human soldier?" He joked that he could cook protein soup and was good at killing aliens. He didn't expect a reply. It was just one last joke before death, but something answered. A soft, smooth voice crackled through the static saying, "You have called." "I accept." Jace froze, confused and scared. The signal came from deep space, far beyond any known area of activity. And then something appeared outside his window, a dark, sleek ship with glowing red veins, like it was alive. It floated with slow, quiet power, not rushing, just watching. Then, to his shock, the airlock on his ship lit up. Someone was boarding. He reached for his pistol, limping as he moved, his whole body aching. The door hissed open, and she walked in. She was tall and pale, with glowing red eyes and long dark hair that floated in the air. She wore a long black cloak, and her presence was calm but dangerous. Her beauty was sharp like a blade. She looked at him and said he had called, and now she had come to claim him. Jace, dazed and bleeding, asked what she was. She said her name was Valith, and she came from the Blooded Stars, a forgotten people who once ruled a part of the galaxy. She said her kind now hid, fed, and remembered. She was alone like him. He had called. She answered. Jace weakly told her it was a joke. But she stepped closer and said she wasn't joking. Before he could argue, his strength failed. His knees buckled, and he collapsed. But she caught him gently in her arms. As he passed out, her voice whispered close to his ear, calling him husband, telling him to rest because they had work to do and that the galaxy would scream before they were done. Jace opened his eyes to dim red light and the feeling of something soft under him. The walls around him seemed to pulse slowly, like they were alive and breathing. It wasn't metal. It wasn't human. He realized he was no longer on the Spearhead. The last thing he remembered was the pale woman, the strange voice, and the eerie black ship outside his window. Now he was lying in what looked like a room grown from organic matter. The bed curved naturally, like a giant petal cradling him. Above, the ceiling shimmered faintly like starlight behind dark glass. In the corner of the room, she stood silently, watching him. Valith, the alien woman who had called herself his wife. She held a tall glass in her hand and offered it to him without a word. He hesitated but took it. The liquid inside was dark red and warm. She said it wasn't blood, just nutrients. His throat was dry, and his body still ached, so he drank. It was bitter, but gave him strength. He sat up slowly, still dizzy, still unsure what was real. He asked where he was. She told him this was the Bloodwing, her ship, and now his. She spoke calmly, with a strange mixture of kindness and danger in her voice. He asked her why she saved him. Her answer was strange, but her words felt honest. She said he called with courage. He had lost everything, and yet he joked into the void. She said he reminded her of something her people had forgotten long ago, hope, even in darkness. And she said she was alone, just like he was. Jace stood slowly and followed her through the living corridors of the ship. They passed walls that pulsed with red energy and floors that seemed to shift as they walked. She brought him to a wide chamber lined with tall windows. Outside floated a field of broken ships. Some were human, some were alien. Some were so old they looked like fossils in space. He stared in silence. Valith explained that these were the ruins of old battles, leftovers from ancient wars, and something terrible was coming again. She said they were called the Hollow Suns monsters from the edge of space, beings of hunger and silence that once fed on stars and souls. Her people had fought them long ago and lost many. Now the Hollow Suns were waking, and no one believed it yet. The empires were too busy fighting each other. Humanity didn't know what waited beyond their borders. Jace asked her what she wanted from him. She turned her glowing eyes to him and said it wasn't just about him fighting. She wanted them to stand together, not as commander and soldier, as partners, as something more. Jace didn't know what to say. He was just a broken captain with no crew and no future. But when he looked at her, he saw no mockery. He saw strength, sadness, and something like belief. Outside the ship, stars burned quietly. But he knew now that war was coming again. A war bigger than human battles, bigger than politics. A war against something that fed on life itself. Valith had chosen him, and deep down, part of him wondered if maybe, just maybe, the galaxy had made a strange mistake. Or the right one. The days passed in a strange rhythm aboard the Bloodwing, a living ship that hummed like a sleeping beast. Jace moved through its warm, breathing corridors, slowly healing, slowly learning. Valith watched him but did not rush him. She gave him space, yet always seemed close, like a shadow that never left. He spent hours studying the ship's controls, which responded not to buttons but to thought, to emotion, even to blood. Valith showed him how to connect with the vessel, how to speak without words, how to feel its hunger and guide its strength. At first, Jace struggled. He was used to metal, fire, engines, but in time, he began to understand. The ship didn't just move through space. It hunted, it fed, it remembered. Valith spoke often of the Hollow Suns. She showed him ancient records, not in data, but in blood-soaked memory. He saw images that played in the walls themselves, giant black spheres. Swallowing stars, ships screaming into silence, cities turned into dust and ash. Her people, once powerful, had been nearly destroyed when they fought those things. Only a few survived. Now the Hollow Suns were rising again, waking from deep space, and no one believed it. The Council of Worlds was too busy arguing. The human alliance was still licking its wounds from the last war. And so she had come to him not for his rank, not for his weapons, but for his fire, the human fire that didn't go out, even in death. Jace felt the weight of it all pressing down on him, but something else rose inside him to purpose. He had lost everything, but this woman, this ship, this mission, they gave him something to fight for again. One night, the sensors of the Kiem Bloodwing picked up a small signal, a human freighter under attack in deep space. Without thinking, Jace ordered the ship to move. Valith said nothing, only watched with sharp eyes. He focused, poured his will into the living controls, and the Bloodwing leapt through the void like a beast pouncing through the stars. They arrived in seconds. Two strange vessels were circling the human ship, draining its power, slicing through its hull with cold blue beams. Jace's blood boiled. He connected with the ship, let his rage flow, and the Bloodwing responded with a roar. Its weapons weren't like normal guns. They were tendrils of energy, shaped by anger and sharpened by thought. The first enemy ship was torn apart in a second, its hull folded like paper. The second turned to run, but Valith whispered a word, and the Bloodwing jumped forward and speared it through with a living spike of red light. Silence returned. The freighter was damaged but alive. Jace opened the channel, told them to leave. Quickly, and they did. Valith looked at him then, not like before. This time, there was something deeper in her gaze. Respect. Maybe even pride. She said, You are more than I hoped." Jace didn't answer. He just looked at the wreckage and felt something shift in his chest. He had fought again not for duty, not for orders, but because he chose to. And he wasn't alone. He was part of something now. Something strange, powerful, and just beginning. Jace stood on the command platform of the Bloodwing, no longer just a passenger, but something closer to its co-pilot. The ship responded faster to him now, its organic systems shaping themselves to his thoughts with less resistance. Valeth remained at his side, quiet but always alert, guiding him when needed, watching him with those crimson eyes that saw deeper than just his flesh. Days had passed since they saved the freighter, and the stars had only grown colder. Signals from deep space came in, ships disappearing, outposts going silent, strange energy readings near the edge of known space. Valeth confirmed his fears. The hollow suns were moving. But worse, they were not coming in a straight path. They were spreading like a virus, silent and deadly. Jace insisted they warn the human alliance, but Valeth told him they would not. Believe. Her people had tried warnings before, centuries ago, and had been ignored or hunted. Still, Jace refused to give up. He told her humans could be blind, but not all were deaf. Some still listened. Some still fought. They set course for the nearest Alliance command post on the edge of Sector 9. As they approached, warnings lit up the Bloodwing's senses, missile locks, scanners, defense turrets. Jace sent a peaceful signal, broadcasting his name, rank, and ship registration. Silence answered. Then came a voice. Cold, suspicious. The outpost demanded he dock under escort and surrender control of his ship for inspection. He glanced at Valeth. She said it was a trap. He agreed, but he had to try. They docked. Armed soldiers entered. Guns pointed. Commands shouted. Jace stepped forward, hands raised, and told them what was happening. The hollow suns, the dead zones, the need to act fast. They laughed, called him a traitor, said he was under alien control, that the Bloodwing was a weapon, and Valeth was the enemy. Before he could argue, a loud alarm screamed across the outpost. Red lights flashed. Something massive had appeared outside. It was black, round, and cold, one of the hollow suns. It had followed them. It had come to silence them. The outpost's weapons fired, but they were too slow, too weak. In seconds, the thing unleashed a wave of dark energy that tore through ships and walls. People screamed. Fire spread. Jace ran. He grabbed a fallen soldier, dragged him out. He yelled for the others to escape. Valeth, untouched by the chaos, moved like wind and shadow, guiding survivors, clearing paths. They reached the dock just as the hollow sun began to pull the station into itself, crushing steel like bone. The Bloodwing opened its hull and pulled them in. Engines roared, and they escaped just as the station was swallowed by the void. Inside the ship, the survivors stared at Jace and Valeth with wide, frightened eyes. One asked, "What was that thing?" Jace looked at them, blood on his face, his voice low and steady. "That," he said, "was the reason you need to start listening." They had come to warn. Now they had witnessed. And the war had truly begun. The survivors from the destroyed outpost sat quietly in the Bloodwing's lower chamber, eyes wide and faces pale, the horror of what they had just witnessed still fresh in their minds. Jace stood before them, blood drying on his uniform, heart pounding from the escape. He told them again what he had already warned the Alliance. The hollow suns were real, alive, and moving fast. Valeth remained near the wall, silent but watchful, her glowing red eyes never blinking. At first, the soldiers were afraid of her, whispering that she was a vampire, a mind controller, a threat. But slowly, they began to understand she had saved them, not harmed them. One officer, Lieutenant Kira Van, stepped forward and asked how long they had before the next hollow sun arrived. Valeth answered in her calm, echoing voice that their enemy never attacked in the same place twice, but would spread to nearby systems. Jace made the decision then they had to warn others, move from colony to colony, ship to ship, and spread the truth. He knew they'd be treated like outlaws, but he didn't care anymore. The Hollow Suns didn't care about borders or flags. They fed on fear, silence, and disbelief. The next few days were hard. The Bloodwing flew through deep space at unnatural speeds, jumping between stars faster than any human ship could. At each stop, Jace and the small crew of survivors told what had happened. Some listened, some laughed. Others tried to arrest them. Once, they were even fired upon. But at every stop, when a hollow sun followed, the truth hit like thunder. Stations vanished, cities fell. Whole moons went dark. Jace fought back each time, growing stronger with the ship, learning how to wield its strange, living weapons. He and Valeth became a pair in battle. He would rage and command, she would guide and strike. Together they cut down things no other Force could touch. People began to whisper their names. A cursed captain in a red-eyed ship. A human and an ancient warrior flying through fire. And then came the first real choice. A colony of over 100,000 sent a signal, begging for help. But another small science base, hidden near the edge of a dark nebula, also called out. The colony was loud and visible. The base was silent and exposed. Valeth said the Hollow Suns would strike the quiet one first. Jace had to choose. He listened to her, even though it meant letting the larger group face danger. They reached the science base just in time, fought a long battle in the shadows, and saved it. From its data cores, they pulled something terrible. The Hollow Suns were learning. They had started using traps, mimicking voices, luring ships. Jace stood in the data chamber, breathing heavily, and realized this wasn't just a war of strength. It was a war of will, of speed, of who could see the truth faster. When he looked at Valeth, he saw the tired lines on her face. She had fought this kind of war before, and now she was doing it again. But she was not alone this time. Neither was he. He reached out and took her hand, not just as a captain or warrior, but as someone who finally understood her loneliness. She didn't pull away. And for the first time since this war began, they shared something more than battle. They shared purpose. They shared hope. And they would burn through the stars to keep that hope alive. Jace stood at the center of the Bloodwing's command chamber, surrounded by new faces, survivors, soldiers, scientists, and even smugglers who had joined them after witnessing the Hollow Suns for themselves. The ship, once quiet and almost empty, now felt alive with voices, plans, and urgency. They had become more than just a warning crew, they were a resistance. Each person brought something useful, knowledge of weapons, data from destroyed stations, or maps of hidden routes. Valeth had grown quiet but focused, watching as humans slowly came together in a way she hadn't seen in ages. She walked beside Jace through the ship's growing chaos, guiding new crew members, sharing parts of the ship only she knew how to control. Jace noticed how people still stared at her, some with fear, others with awe, but no one questioned her after seeing her in battle. She moved like a ghost, but when she fought, she became a storm. One day, while scanning a broken relay satellite, the crew found a hidden message. It was a secret signal from a human fleet stationed near the dead zone of Tau Veras, one of the last major strongholds in the Outer Rim. The message was clear. Enemy rising. Civilian evacuation failed. We need help now. Jace didn't hesitate. He gathered his officers, including Kira Van and Valeth, and made a plan. The Hollow Suns were already near Tau Veras. If the fleet fell, the rest of the sector would be open to attack. Jace decided to fight beside them. They set course immediately. When they arrived, the system was on fire. Ships exploded in the black sky, station fragments spun like bones in space, and a single hollow sun loomed at the center, its size impossible, its pole dragging everything closer like a giant mouth. The human fleet was fractured, their communications jammed. Jace ordered the Bloodwing forward, its living body moving through debris like a hunter stalking prey. They launched their strange weapons, burning lashes of energy, living missiles, and mental bursts that confused the enemy. But this hollow sun was stronger. It had learned from the last battles. It split itself into smaller parts, each one attacking a different section of the fleet. Jace and Valith fought together, minds connected, movements in sync. He shouted orders, and she made the ship obey. The crew held their ground, even as the hollow sun tried to drain their strength, whispering lies through broken radios. But even with all their power, the tide was turning against them. Ships were being pulled into the hollow sun's core. Engines failed. Fear spread. Then Valith did something Jace didn't expect. She gave a part of her own blood to the ship. The reaction was violent. The Bloodwing screamed, its skin glowing red and gold, its speed doubling. With that power, Jace launched a final charge, spearing through the core of the hollow sun. It cracked, screamed, and exploded in silence. The force of it shook the system. Pieces of dark matter scattered like shattered glass. The fleet was saved. Cheers echoed across Cums, but Valith collapsed. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes dimmed. Jace caught her before she fell, panic rising in his chest. She smiled weakly and said, "That power was not meant to be used again. But for you, for them, I gave it freely." He carried her to the healing chamber, ignoring the pain in his own limbs, and stayed at her side as the ship sealed around her. For the first time, he feared more than war. He feared losing her. And he realized something deep and terrifying. He didn't just respect her. He didn't just need her in battle. He cared for her, deeply. Now, as the ship drifted in silence after the battle, with survivors resting and stars burning around them, Jace sat by her side and made a quiet promise. If she woke, he would fight harder, not just for humanity, not just for victory, but for her. Because somewhere along the path of blood, fire, and war, he had fallen for the vampire woman who answered his joke, and he wasn't ready to lose her. Not now. Not ever. Valith slept inside the heart chamber of the Bloodwing, her body wrapped in layers of glowing biosilk grown by the ship itself, pulsing slowly with her faint life signs. Jace sat beside her day and night, barely sleeping, barely eating, his eyes fixed on her peaceful face. She looked smaller somehow, her power dimmed, her body cold. Every few hours, the ship made soft sounds like a heartbeat, like breathing, trying to keep her alive. The crew respected the silence around her chamber, whispering when they passed, watching their captain with quiet eyes. Jace had become a different man since that last battle. He no longer fought for survival alone. He fought with purpose, with fire, and with something deeper than war love. The crew, now grown to nearly 50, kept the ship moving. They repaired systems, mapped safe zones, and responded to distress calls from smaller colonies still unaware of the hollow suns. Jace forced himself to lead. He gave orders, joined battle planning, and made contact with new resistance cells that were forming in scattered systems. News of the hollow suns had finally reached the larger fleet commanders, and whispers of the Bloodwing and its strange captain and his vampire allies spread like wildfire. Some saw them as heroes. Others called them monsters. But none denied their victories. One night, while reviewing maps in the strategy chamber, Jace was called urgently to the heart chamber. The walls were glowing brighter, the air thicker with energy. He ran through the corridors, heart pounding with fear and hope. When he reached her, he saw the biosilk peeling away. Velith's eyes opened slowly, dim at first, then burning bright crimson again. Her first breath was long and deep, and the entire ship seemed to shudder in response. Jace fell to his knees beside her, his voice shaking as he said her name. She looked at him and smiled weakly. "You stayed," she whispered. He took her hand, warm again. "Of course I did." She sat up slowly, her strength returning as the ship fed her energy. "I gave more than I should," she admitted. "But I heard you, even in sleep. I heard your heart." They sat together in silence for a while, hand in hand, letting the moment hold them. Later, Velith stood before the crew, pale but tall, her presence commanding as ever. She thanked them for holding the ship, for fighting beside her, and for following Jace, whom she now called the Fire in the Cold. The crew clapped, cheered, and the mood aboard the Bloodwing changed from survival to unity. That same night, a message came through. The hollow suns had begun forming a massive cluster near the core systems. It wasn't just raids anymore. It was an invasion. Jace knew what it meant. The next battle wouldn't be like the others. It would be the turning point. As he stared at the star map, he felt Velith step beside him. Her hand found his, strong and sure. She looked at the glowing red storm forming near the galaxy center and said, "We go together." Jace nodded. He no longer had to face the darkness alone. She was back. And with her return, the final war had begun. The final battle began as the Bloodwing soared toward the core systems, where the stars were dim and the sky was heavy with silence. Ahead, the hollow suns gathered like a storm of black holes, pulsing with red energy, ready to consume everything. Jace stood at the front of the command chamber, surrounded by his crew, their faces calm but firm, knowing they might not return. Velith stood beside him, her strength fully restored, her eyes burning bright, her presence silent and powerful. Word had spread through the stars. Hundreds of ships answered the call. Old freighters turned into war vessels, scout ships repainted, with resistance symbols, and even a few former enemies joined. They had all seen the truth. The hollow suns had no alliance, no reason, they simply destroyed. Jace and Velith had become symbols now, not just leaders, but living proof that unity could stand against fear. The allied fleet followed the Bloodwing. Into the heart of the darkness, engines glowing, weapons ready. As they approached the center, a massive hollow sun began to awaken. It was larger than anything they had seen before, like a dying star wrapped in shadow. It released waves of dark energy that struck the fleet, disabling some ships, tearing others apart. The sky lit up with fire and debris, but the fleet did not break. They fought with everything: missiles, plasma beams, and even old cannons. Jace commanded with calm fire, shouting orders, adjusting formations, finding weak spots in the enemy. Velith, joined mentally with the Bloodwing, unleashed living weapons that tore through the dark matter beasts surrounding the hollow sun. The battle stretched for hours, every minute a struggle between light and shadow, between will and fear. Ships fell, friends died, but still they pressed forward. Jace's voice never wavered. He led charge after charge, ignoring wounds, pain, or the dying cries on the comms. Velith gave more of herself to the ship, burning brighter and brighter, until the Bloodwing became a beacon in the void. Then came the final strike. The hollow sun began to collapse in on itself, ready to unleash a wave that would destroy the entire fleet. Jace made the call. The Bloodwing would dive into the core and deliver a final, deadly blow. It meant possible death, no return, but no one argued. The crew accepted their fate. Jace and Valith locked eyes one last time. No words were needed. In that look was everything: trust, love, fire. Together they launched into the core. The ship screamed through waves of dark matter, shields cracking, walls burning. At the center, Jace poured every memory, every rage, every love into the ship's core. Valith did the same. The ship responded, releasing a blast so powerful it ripped through the hollow sun, tearing it apart from within. Then silence. In the emptiness that followed, light returned. The fleet survived. The hollow sun was gone. The war had turned. The crew cheered. Signals from other systems reported that the hollow suns were retreating, fading, breaking apart. Jace woke in a quiet chamber. He was alive. Valith was beside him, her hand in his, her breath steady. They had survived. They had won. Not just through weapons, but through unity, sacrifice, and belief. And though the galaxy still held scars, it now also held a new legend of a human who shouted a joke into the stars and an alien vampire woman who answered it with a promise. Together, they had changed everything.